Today on Salty Frog YouTube, we're going to talk about one of the main pieces of tackle used to fish in the marshes of Louisiana, the popping cork. What makes a good one, how to select one, what to look for, and at the end, some mistakes you're making. See y'all at the table. All right, folks. Evidently, the first part of using a popping cork is selecting the right one. And there's really 4 factors to consider when you're selecting a popping cork. We're going to go into each one of these in a second. But the first one being visibility, the second being castability, then durability, and presentation. So let's break all those down real quick and help you select the right cork for you. All right, visibility. You know, a lot of people, when they think of visibility, they think about the color, which is true. You know, you have to be able to see the color in the water at a far distance, even up close, to be able to see the cork, see what's happening with the bait underneath it. Common colors: pink, orange. I find that green and yellow give me problems, so I usually stick with pink and orange. But it's not all about the color. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking that, you know, to see the cork is all about color. There is another part of visibility that's very, very important. It's most commonly overlooked by a lot of fishermen when they're fishing corks. And that would be the height of the cork in the water. So you'll get a lot of corks that are really, really bottom heavy, and you'll only get, you know, the top third of the cork sticking out of the water. Those windy days when that water's rolling, or you got a little bit of a chop out there, you're not gonna be able to see that cork. I like a cork that sits a little bit higher, usually halfway or a little lower. I don't like to go any lower than that, and a lot of corks won't sit that high, just because whenever you're working the cork, if this thing is sitting too high up in the water, you're not going to get that popping action that you want, especially with the cup corks. So about halfway into the water is kind of what I like to see, or a little bit less. I go with Undertaker corks just because they sit that high in the water. And we'll go into some other things. They cast good, they're durable, the presentation's great on them. But the height in the water is another part of visibility that a lot of people overlook. You have to be able to see it to know what's happening underneath it. So color, and then height, it sits up in the water. Very, very important when it comes to selecting the right popping cork for you. What I suggest to a lot of folks, you know, I do use Undertaker corks, but, you know, I would, when you're going out for corks, you never buy one. Buy 2 or 3 different ones. Try all, you know, 2 or 3 of them out. See which one you like best, and go with that one and stick with it. Don't be afraid to change it up. But color first, and then how high it sits up above the water would be the second thing, the visibility. That's that's commonly overlooked when it comes to selecting a popping cork. I know it seems minor, but it'll make a huge difference in what you're catching. All right, the next thing when it comes to selecting a good cork would, of course, be if you can cast it, castability of a cork. Uh, Corks, they weigh a different amount. Most of them will have like a 3/8 weight at the bottom of the cork, combined with a washer, some beads, usually either a stainless steel line or titanium is the most common. You really want that cork to be heavy enough to throw, but not heavy enough to bring it down into the water to where you can't see it, which goes back to visibility again. The other thing to consider with castability is you want to find the right length of this wire. You don't want one that's significantly huge because they'll tangle easy. Again, select you a couple corks, 2 or 3, go out there, cast them, and get stupid with them. Cast it sideways, underarm, overhand, see if you can get that cork tangled. And if that cork doesn't tangle very easy, it would be a great cork for you. So the weight of the cork overall, can you send it? Can you get a good cast out of it? And then does it tangle? Is your line gonna get snagged or wrapped around the cork? Are the swivels real good? Do they operate well to where it keeps the line away from that cork? Just go out there and try them. But can you cast it? You need to be able to send the cork out. You need to be able to make sure that when it's out there, it can operate properly because it's not tangled. The next thing in selecting a good cork is, of course, durability. I mean, you're paying $7 to $9 a cork, especially a good popping cork. You want to make sure that you're getting your money's worth. I've got corks here that have probably caught over 200 fish. I want to make sure I'm getting my money out of my corks. The main thing, 2 places where the cork really starts to break down and not function properly on lesser corks is going to be this wire right here. So you want to make sure you got a good strong wire. If you're finding a lot of bending, a lot of guys like to go with titanium because it flexes back. The other thing that's usually missed out on is a lot of these corks, the bottom of them will wear out. As you can see, this particular brand, Undertaker, has a ring here. It has a washer that stops the weight from hitting the bottom of the cork. Usually that'll tear the bottom up and your corks won't last as long. So those 2 things I would look for when you're looking at the package and looking at the cork. Is there something to stop this weight or this bead or whatever is right there from hitting the bottom of the cork and wearing it out and tearing up that foam? And the wire, is it stiff? Is it flexible? Can you bend it a little bit? It flexes right back. Those 2 things with durability are the most important when it comes to a popping cork, because anything happens to this wire right here, the bottom of your cork or the top of your cork starts getting eaten away at, it's going to affect the action of that cork and what that cork is doing to that bait underneath. And this getting worn out can actually end up causing this to go further in than it needs to if you don't have a washer there, and give you some problems with tangles. So durability, those 2 things need to look for in a cork. The next thing that you really want to consider when buying a cork is presentation. And this means more to the fish than it does the angler. And what do I mean by presentation? How much does this thing slide? You want a good couple of inches of slide on your cork where your cork is making those beads jump. I like a cup cork just because it adds a little splash whenever you're popping it. And then the beads, what kind of sound does that cork make? You've got some that have got small beads like this one that makes a really high-pitched clack. I tend to find that noise does really well all around, redfish and trout. And then you've got some corks that have the big, giant black beads or bigger beads at the bottom that make a little bit deeper tone. Those do really well at redfish. So all around good corks. They'll have a really good sound to them. They'll have some glass beads on top, glass bead under the weight, or they'll have some big black beads or something on them to make a deeper tone. But you really need to think of the sound the cork makes and how much the cork moves to move those beads on that steel rod. You got to think of it as a dinner bell. This cork is a dinner bell to fish. It mimics the sound the bait makes under the water, and it mimics the sound that feeding fish make on top. That sound's going to bring them in just like a dinner bell. They're going to come, and that bait, you know, whether it be artificial or be live shrimp, just happens to be there, and they smack it. And that's really what you want to look for in presentation, is something that's going to call those fish in and get them to eat whatever's underneath this cork. And then speaking of baits, we're going to go right into rigging next. So rigging a cork's pretty simple. You got your main line, ties up here on the top. You got a line that ties on the swivel on the bottom that goes down to your hook or your pre-rigged bait at the bottom. There's a couple different ways to rig underneath a cork depending on what you're using. I like going with a 1/8 ounce jig head just because it's versatile. You can do live bait on it, or you can run an artificial underneath it. Depending on the water depths, how long the leader is going to be, and we'll go into that and some of the mistakes that a lot of people make. But I mean, you can't go wrong with a 1/8 jig head underneath a popping cork. It gives you the ability to change on the fly between live bait and artificial bait. If you know you're not going to be fishing live, you know, you can do a pre-rigged bait like a Mojo shrimp or a Marker 54 shrimp. Those two baits seem to do really, really well in southeast Louisiana. Or you can just stick with the jig head and thread your favorite plastic on, whether it be a Marsh Demon lure, Lost Coast Customs bait, matrix shad, anything like that you can rig on this. So I usually like to go with the 1/8 jig heads just because it's so versatile. And again, you know, artificials, you might want to pop a little bit more than you do a live bait. Live bait, you typically don't have to pop as much. Artificials, you got to keep them moving because they're not alive, so you got to make them look alive. So all things to consider when rigging this, you know. And as you pop this cork above the water, keep in mind that you gotta get your timing down, because this bait's going to come up in the water column and then drift back down as the cork settles. So you don't want to pop it too much. You want to give that bait a chance to flow down before you pop it again. Usually baits with a lot of action, or baits that have a slow drop, do really well under a popping cork. So that's the two ways I rig them. Again, 1/8 ounce jig head's my favorite way to go because it's versatile. But a lot of people do like pre-rigged baits underneath them, like the Mojo shrimp and the Marker 54, and then you can do live bait underneath them too. So all right, the next thing, a lot of people you know, they tie this on, they think of it as an old traditional cork, where you're fishing for brim or sac-a-lait is what we call them in Louisiana. They call them crappie in other parts of the country. You're not letting this cork sit. This cork is your tool in affecting whatever's underneath it and calling the fish in, like we talked before with the sound. So mistake number one is just throwing it out there and letting it sit. you really want to pop this cork. This cork is designed to be moving. It's designed to move the bait underneath it. It's designed to call the fish in. If you're just throwing it out and letting it sit, you'll catch fish, but you're going to miss a lot of fish too, because the fish are just not going to know it's there. They just happen to stumble upon it. But popping the cork is very, very important. You want to get that motion, that presentation. You want to make sure that you're using the cork for what it's intended for. So that'd be mistake number one. Mistake number two is probably the most common mistake a lot of inshore anglers make, and that's leader length. They'll tie 2.5, 3 foot on here, and they'll keep it like that all day, no matter where they're fishing at. The problem with that is, let's say you got 3 foot of leader on here because you're fishing speckled trout out in the middle of a bay or a lagoon, and you decide later, hey, I'm gonna go hit the banks for redfish, and it's only, a foot, 1.5 feet, 2 feet deep right there. Well, your bait's sitting on the bottom, not having a whole lot of action to it. So you really want to adjust that leader length to the depth of the water, or you're going to be missing out on fish. And the opposite is true too. You could be fishing redfish in the morning and have a foot or a 1.5 foot leader and be out there in the middle of a 4 or 5 foot open lagoon and not getting any bites because the speckled trout are down lower. But you really want to get your leader length right. Trust me, I know it's a pain. You're sitting there, you got to go, you got to, cut the hook off, shorten your leader, or you got to cut the line off and lengthen your leader. But at the end of the day, it's going to save you a lot of missed opportunities, and it's going to allow you to catch more fish. You really, really want to pay attention to your leader length and how short or long you have it in consideration with the depth of the water.